Those Days with the Monsters, Part 30. The Khumans were moving in a quiet rush through the ship. Kirrel's frills carried a hint of yellow as he watched them clearing a cargo bay of the odds and ends stored inside. They rarely treated anything this seriously. The last time had been when they suited up to attack Kazurkan.
Alex,
he murmured, sidling up to her as she stood overseeing the others. He couldn't seem to get up the courage to ask what she was doing on the ship. He shook his head slightly.
I heard someone talking about Operation Washerwoman and Operation Woodsman. What's the difference?
Alex shook her head. That reference is a bit in-depth for me, kid. Sleepy could probably tell you, but I don't know for sure. She turned her gaze from the cargo bay to Kirrel. I thought you didn't want to know more of our stories. Kirrel's frills flared a bit, their edges turning red, but he didn't know what exactly he'd been expecting. Of course it would be another story. He didn't want to understand anymore, but he began to think it was necessary.
I will go ask Sleepy then.
Suddenly he remembered the first story, the one that had made him not want to know any others.
Is Operation Iron Shoes
from the Red Hot Iron Shoes? I think so. I'm not sure on the code names. I know that it's pretty accurate, if that's why. Kirrel's heart sank. He was beginning to understand Khuman metaphor, but he didn't want to imagine that this might be that kind of metaphor.
Is this going to...
He didn't want to think it, but even so an image floated in front of his eyes. One he'd seen back in school. Even rollaways went to school. The image of a planet after a collision. Its ordinary surface transformed into a sea of molten rock, hung in his mind and stained his frills red. Well, I don't know exactly what you're thinking of, but it is pretty extreme. We're trying to behave, but Iron Shoes is a last resort. We're going to keep going with Washerwoman for a while though, I think. The best option would be to couple Washerwoman and Iron Shoes, but I don't think that'll happen. Kirrel remained very confused, but decided not to ask, instead choosing to observe the crew as they cleared the cargo bay and welded metal strips to the floor.
Is this all to carry one thing?
It looked as if they were reinforcing the bay, as though the floor would not be enough to carry the place's future cargo.
Isn't the floor here an external shield wall?
Yes and no. Grumpy says we'll want them, and if Grumpy says something, it's smart to listen. Alex raised her eyebrows, one side of her mouth rising a bit, but not the way they did for the teeth-baring look. Kirrel's translator didn't understand that one, but Kirrel had been getting knocked over by her enough that he thought it might be replacing a shrug. He wasn't quite sure. It was still tricky for him to understand Khuman expressions. They had so many.
So, you don't know either?
Kirrel turned his head back towards the cargo bay and watched Grumpy carefully examining the metal strips, then taking the sheets of fibre in his hands, smacking someone lightly and gesturing. From the look on the other Khuman's face, he seemed to be pointing out a mistake. The other Khuman looked annoyed, but Grumpy leaned forward and seemed to whisper something, and the other nodded.
Alex, have I seen that Khuman around before?
Probably not to know him. That's Tinker. Don't call him that, but that's what the rest of us call him behind his back. He works with Grumpy, but it looks like Grumpy's being way more nitpicky than usual.
Nitpicky?
That wasn't in the lexicon, not even close. Unlike the term K-wire, there wasn't even a crew translation available to Kirrel. It's from... well, I'm not perfectly sure, but let's not go worrying about it. It means close inspection and picking up on anything wrong, that's all. Alex seemed uncomfortable. Did that mean it was another aspect of a death world that he didn't want to know about? It seemed likely. With a slight flush of sad blue, Kirrel found himself thinking about the days when he was panicking about the existence of a Khuman's Earth. When had he stopped shaking at the idea of a planet like that, and started shaking when Sleepy stood up? Was it when the Tizzicks vanished from the bridge in a swirl of green, or when he learned the idea of not here, not today? It was certainly before the Khumans attacked Kazurkan. Somehow, insensibly, he had gotten more comfortable with the prospect of death. How absurd for a rollaway who ran from his inevitable death from giving up to now accept its presence in far more uncomfortable ways. "You okay, kid? You look like something's bothering you."
No, it's fine. I think I'll go ask Sleepy about the names."
His frills pulsed a quick, startled red, then flushed purple.
"Oh, I mean, do you think he's awake?"
"He should be. It's getting close to his watch." Kirrel looked around at the busy Khumans.
"Why are they all still here then? Isn't he usually quiet when Sleepy comes out?"
"Not sure how you got that idea. Sleepy's, well, he usually just sort of appears at some point. We finish up what we're doing, and then we all get some rest and Sleepy's just already there." Alex bared her teeth. "If you want to go find him, good luck. None of us are really sure where he goes most of the time. We know where his quarters are, and we know where he is when he's on shift. But the rest of the time he just appears, like a ghost."
"Ghost?"
Kirrel's translator interpreted the word as wandering dead, but the connotations were confusing to say the least. The translator was working overtime, stating various connections such as monster, comedy, fear, friendly, and small children candy games, not many of which were associated with the concept of wandering dead for the Yilem. He might have to take the thing out until it gave up at this rate. Ghosts, they're a spooky thing from folklore. I think most cultures on Earth have some variation of ghosts, so it really depends on who's telling. Kirrel made a slight face as his translator started its list of connotations over from the beginning, triggered by Alex's use of the word. His head was starting to spin as it overlaid the list on top of the last one and still translated the easier words.
Alex, please don't say that word again. My translator's getting confused."
He poked it, his frill spines turning a faint orange.
"It keeps saying children candy games now. I think it said it 4 times at this point."
"Hey Grumpy, got time to check the kid's translator? He's having troubles," Alex shouted across the cargo bay. Kirrel's frills flushed purple with some red on the very edges.
I didn't mean..."
"Hey kid, I want to be able to talk to you when you show up at the gym, okay? Don't be embarrassed. I'm the one doing the hollering, and I got no shame, so I don't know what you're worked up about." Kirrel felt his frills settling, though he wasn't sure why they should be settling. Alex's words had been very abrupt, though her tone sounded like she thought the words should be comforting. He found his frills back at resting position, but quite orange with irritation. A bit of weight settled on the wall behind him, and Kirrel glanced at it, wondering if the wall was shifting. "Hey, a spaceman." Kirrel's frills were instantly raised to full again.
"Hello, Sleepy."
He glanced at Alex, who had bared her teeth slightly. "Told you." "Sleepy, the kid's got some questions for you if you don't mind." Kirrel's frills flushed purple and orange. Why, oh why, couldn't Alex let him choose when to ask? "Sure thing, spaceman. Ask away. I'll answer you if I can." Kirrel wanted to ask about Operation Washerwoman and Operation Woodsman, but that wasn't the first thing out of his mouth.
"What's iron shoes?"